When most people think about migraines, they think of pain, crippling headaches, light sensitivity, nausea. But what almost no one talks about is the metabolic side of migraines. The brain is the hungriest organ in the body, demanding a constant supply of energy. When that energy supply is disrupted, when insulin resistance limits the brain's access to fuel, it can trigger or worsen migraines. This isn't just about headaches. It's about understanding that migraines are a signal, a symptom of a deeper metabolic dysfunction. If you or someone you love suffers from migraines, then you need to know this. By improving insulin sensitivity and restoring the body's natural ability to use fuel, we can often reduce the frequency and severity of migraines, and in some cases prevent them entirely. Migraines don't just happen in the head, they start in the metabolism. Migraines are often thought of as simply a brain problem, a mysterious neurological event that arrives suddenly and leaves people incapacitated. But what if we've been looking at them too narrowly? What if the real story isn't just about nerves firing in the wrong way, but about the entire metabolic system failing to provide the brain with what it needs? The truth is, migraines are not just neurological. They are deeply connected to metabolic health. And when we start to see them through this lens, it changes everything about how we understand and manage them. The brain is the most energy-hungry organ in the body, consuming more than 20% of the energy we generate, even though it only makes up about 2% of our total weight. That means it is constantly demanding fuel, and it needs that fuel in a steady, reliable stream. Most people assume the brain can only run on glucose, but that isn't true. The brain also thrives on ketones, an alternative fuel that becomes especially important when glucose availability is impaired. Here's where metabolism comes in. If the body is insulin resistant, which is increasingly common today, glucose becomes trapped in the blood and cells can't access it properly. That includes brain cells. When neurons struggle to get the energy they need, they become unstable and more vulnerable to triggers. This instability can be the spark that ignites a migraine. Think of it this way: if you were powering your home with electricity, but the wires were faulty, you'd have flickering lights, power surges, and breakdowns. That's what happens in the insulin-resistant brain. The energy supply is there, but it isn't being delivered in a steady way. Instead of smooth, stable power, the brain experiences spikes and crashes. Each crash leaves it more sensitive to light, sound, and stress, and for many people, this translates into a migraine. This connection between metabolism and migraines explains why so many sufferers notice their headaches tied to certain foods, fasting, skipped meals, or even stress. All of these situations have a profound impact on blood sugar and insulin. A sugary snack might spike glucose, giving a brief sense of relief, but as insulin surges and then glucose plummets, the brain is left starved again. This roller coaster sets the stage for pain. On the other hand, when people stabilize their metabolism, whether through diet, movement, or stress control, they often see their migraines improve in both frequency and severity. Science is catching up with this reality. Researchers have found that migraine patients often have higher rates of insulin resistance compared to those who don't experience migraines. They also show differences in mitochondrial function, the tiny power plants inside every cell that generate energy. If these mitochondria aren't working properly, the brain is even more vulnerable. It isn't that the brain is broken, it's that the energy supply chain is compromised. That's why interventions that strengthen metabolic health can be so powerful for migraine sufferers. The empowering part of this message is that migraines don't have to feel random or unmanageable. If they are tied to metabolism, with then addressing the underlying dysfunction gives people back a sense of control. Improving insulin sensitivity through low glycemic eating, resistance training, quality sleep, and stress management can change the landscape of brain energy. When the brain has reliable access to fuel, it becomes more resilient, less sensitive, and less likely to tip into a migraine state. So, the next time someone describes migraines as just headaches in the brain, remember this: they are also a message from the body. They are a sign that the brain's energy needs aren't being met because the metabolic system isn't working as it should. When we begin to treat migraines not only as a neurological condition but also as a metabolic one, we open the door to real solutions. This shift in perspective doesn't just help relieve pain in the moment, it helps restore long-term brain health, giving migraine sufferers hope and the possibility of freedom from cycles that once felt inescapable. Insulin resistance is often discussed in the context of weight gain, diabetes, or heart disease, but few people realize how profoundly it impacts the brain. When we think about migraines, most imagine them as isolated neurological storms, painful episodes that seem to strike without warning, but beneath that pain is often a metabolic disruption, and insulin resistance is at the center of it. The truth is, insulin resistance disrupts the brain's ability to access energy, and that disruption fuels migraine risk. The brain runs on energy the way a car runs on fuel, and unlike the muscles that can rest between workouts, the brain never gets a break. It is working all the time, consuming more than 1/5 of the body's energy even when we're asleep. But the brain doesn't store fuel. It relies on a constant supply delivered moment by moment from the bloodstream. Insulin is the hormone that helps regulate this process, shuttling glucose into cells where it can be used to produce energy. When the system is working well, neurons have the fuel they need to fire, communicate, and perform the millions of tasks that keep us alive and thinking clearly. When insulin resistance develops, however, this smooth process starts to break down. The body is producing plenty of insulin, often more than normal, but the cells aren't responding to it. This means glucose builds up in the bloodstream, while the very cells that need it most, the neurons, struggle to access it. Imagine standing outside a bakery with shelves full of bread, but the doors are locked. That's what happens inside the insulin-resistant brain. There's plenty of fuel nearby, but the cells can't get it. For a brain that thrives on constant, steady energy, this becomes a crisis. Migraines often appear in this crisis zone. When neurons can't get the fuel they need, they become unstable. They misfire, they send distress signals, and they become hypersensitive to stimuli. Light feels brighter, sound feels louder, stress feels heavier. The energy shortage makes the brain more vulnerable to triggers, and the result is often a migraine attack. This explains why migraine sufferers frequently describe their headaches as unpredictable yet tied to blood sugar fluctuations, skipped meals, or certain high-carbohydrate foods. Each of these events puts additional stress on an already energy-compromised brain. Research supports this link. Studies show that people with migraines are more likely to have insulin resistance compared to those without migraines. They also tend to have markers of impaired glucose metabolism. In fact, some researchers propose that migraines may be one of the earliest warning signs of metabolic dysfunction, appearing long before diabetes or other obvious conditions are diagnosed. If that's the case, migraines aren't just a neurological disorder, they are a metabolic alarm bell ringing inside the brain. The good news is that if insulin resistance is fueling migraine risk, then improving insulin sensitivity can calm that fire. This is where lifestyle becomes medicine. Choosing foods that don't spike blood sugar, incorporating resistance training to improve how muscles use glucose, managing stress to lower cortisol, and prioritizing sleep all play a role in restoring insulin sensitivity. Each of these habits helps the brain regain consistent access to energy, smoothing out the instability that often precedes migraines. Think of the brain like a city that depends on electricity. If the power lines are broken, even a small surge or dip can cause outages. Fixing the lines doesn't just prevent blackouts, it makes the entire city run more smoothly. In the same way, repairing insulin sensitivity doesn't just reduce migraine risk, it enhances overall brain function. People often notice improved focus, more stable moods, and even better memory when their metabolism improves. For someone who has battled migraines for years, this kind of stability can feel life-changing. So while it's tempting to view migraines as random neurological events, the deeper truth is that many are fueled by an energy crisis in the brain caused by insulin resistance. When the body can't deliver fuel properly, the brain suffers the consequences. But the story doesn't end there. By restoring metabolic health, by giving the brain steady access to the fuel it needs, migraine sufferers can regain control. This isn't just about preventing pain, it's about creating a foundation for long-term brain resilience. And that shift in perspective gives hope where there once was only frustration. Blood sugar is one of the most overlooked drivers of migraines. Most people think of blood sugar only in terms of diabetes or maybe weight gain, but the reality is that it influences brain health every single moment of the day. The brain depends on a constant, steady supply of energy, and blood sugar is a major part of that system. But when blood sugar spikes too high and then crashes too low, it creates instability in the brain that can ignite the perfect storm for migraine triggers. When we eat a meal that is high in sugar or refined carbohydrates, blood sugar rises quickly. The body responds by releasing insulin, which is designed to bring that sugar down by moving it into the cells. But in many people, the rise is so steep that the body releases a large surge of insulin, and that swing pulls blood sugar down too far, too fast. What began as a high peak is followed by a sharp crash. This roller coaster might feel familiar: an initial burst of energy or comfort after eating, then a sudden drop leaving you tired, irritable, foggy, and, for many, on the edge of a migraine. The brain is extremely sensitive to these shifts. It has no storage tank for fuel. Every second it relies on the bloodstream to deliver energy. During a spike, there is too much sugar, and that can actually damage delicate neurons over time. During the crash, there is not enough sugar, and the brain feels starved. This instability makes neurons hyperreactive, primed to misfire in response to light, sound, or stress. In that vulnerable state, it doesn't take much to push someone into a migraine. With many migraine sufferers recognize this pattern without fully understanding it. They notice that skipping meals or eating something sweet often precedes an attack. They might feel a headache building in the afternoon after a sugary breakfast, or late at night after a heavy carb-filled dinner. These are not coincidences. They are the brain's response to the turbulence of blood sugar swings. Each spike and crash is like shaking the foundation of a house. It weakens the stability of the structure, and eventually cracks begin to appear. Science backs this up. Research shows that people with migraines are more likely to have impaired glucose regulation, meaning their blood sugar levels rise higher and fall faster than in people without migraines. In some studies, stabilizing blood sugar through dietary changes has been shown to reduce both the frequency and severity of migraine attacks. This highlights an empowering truth: if blood sugar instability fuels migraines, then stabilizing blood sugar can calm the storm. The key is not to avoid carbohydrates completely, but to be strategic with them. Foods that release glucose slowly into the bloodstream, such as whole vegetables, protein, and healthy fats, provide the brain with a steady stream of energy instead of a sudden surge. Pairing protein with carbs, eating smaller balanced meals, and avoiding highly processed snacks can dramatically reduce the ups and downs. When blood sugar is stable, the brain is calmer, more resilient, and less likely to spiral into a migraine state. Beyond food, lifestyle plays a role too. Stress hormones like cortisol can drive blood sugar higher, even without eating. Poor sleep also disrupts blood sugar control, leaving the body more vulnerable to spikes and crashes the next day. This is why migraine management cannot be reduced to a single trigger. It is often the interaction of diet, stress, and sleep that sets the stage for instability. Once you see the pattern, though, it becomes clear that controlling blood sugar is one of the most powerful tools for preventing migraines. So when we say that blood sugar spikes and crashes create the perfect storm for migraine triggers, it's not just theory. It's lived experience for millions. The brain doesn't want chaos. It thrives on consistency. By smoothing out the roller coaster of blood sugar, you give your brain the stability it craves. And when the brain is stable, migraines lose their grip. That shift transforms migraines from a random, uncontrollable force into something you can influence, something you can fight, and for many, something you can prevent. Deep inside every cell of your body are tiny power plants called mitochondria. These structures are responsible for producing almost all of the energy you use to think, move, heal, and simply stay alive. Nowhere is this more critical than in the brain, which consumes more energy than any other organ. For someone who suffers from migraines, understanding mitochondria is essential, because when these power plants falter, the brain doesn't have the fuel stability it needs. Strengthening mitochondrial function through diet and lifestyle is one of the most powerful strategies to reduce migraine frequency and restore brain resilience. Mitochondria take nutrients like glucose and fatty acids and convert them into a usable energy currency called ATP. Every thought, every nerve impulse, every heartbeat is powered by this process. But like any engine, mitochondria can become inefficient or damaged. When that happens, with the cells, especially neurons, struggle to keep up with their energy demands. In the brain, this deficiency can trigger instability, leaving nerve cells hypersensitive and more likely to tip into the state that produces a migraine. It's not that the brain is broken. It's that the power plants inside it aren't working at full strength. Research has shown that migraine sufferers often have mitochondrial dysfunction. This doesn't mean their mitochondria have failed entirely, but rather that they aren't producing energy as effectively as they should. These individuals may also produce more oxidative stress, a kind of cellular rust that further weakens mitochondrial efficiency. The end result is the same with the brain is left vulnerable. Just as a city with a weak electrical grid suffers frequent blackouts, a brain with struggling mitochondria suffers frequent migraines. The good news is that mitochondria are not fixed in their state. They can be strengthened, repaired, and multiplied through the right inputs. One of the most effective strategies is diet. Nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, CoQ10, and riboflavin have all been shown to support mitochondrial health. Diets that avoid extreme blood sugar swings and provide steady, nutrient-rich fuel reduce the strain on mitochondria, allowing them to function more efficiently. Some people find relief with ketogenic or low-carb approaches because ketones serve as a cleaner, more efficient fuel for brain mitochondria compared to glucose. When the mitochondria are fed properly, they generate steadier energy and reduce the likelihood of triggering migraines. Lifestyle plays an equally important role. Exercise, particularly resistance training and aerobic activity, stimulates a process called mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria. The more power plants your cells have, the more resilient they become. Sleep is another critical factor. During deep sleep, the brain clears out waste products and restores mitochondrial health. Chronic stress, on the other hand, floods the body with hormones that damage mitochondria over time, which is why stress management is not just about emotional well-being, but about cellular energy as well. Even simple habits can make a big difference. Consistency in meal timing helps stabilize energy supply. Hydration ensures mitochondria have the fluid environment they need to function properly. Avoiding excessive alcohol, smoking, and ultra-processed foods reduces the toxic load that otherwise damages these power plants. Every choice you make either supports or sabotages mitochondrial function, and for migraine sufferers, these choices can mean the difference between another painful episode or a calmer, clearer day. When you begin to strengthen mitochondria, the changes ripple outward. The brain no longer struggles with the same level of instability, and neurons fire more smoothly. Instead of teetering on the edge of collapse with every stressor or skipped meal, the brain has a stronger foundation. Over time, this translates into fewer migraine attacks, less severity when they do occur, and a greater sense of control. So while migraines may feel random and unstoppable, they are often rooted in something very physical and very changeable: the health of your mitochondria. By focusing on diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management, you are not just treating symptoms. You are rebuilding the energy engines that keep your brain stable. Strengthening mitochondrial function gives migraine sufferers a powerful lever to pull, turning a life once dominated by unpredictable pain into one marked by resilience and strength. When most people hear the phrase insulin sensitivity, their minds immediately jump to diabetes prevention. And yes, improving insulin sensitivity is one of the most powerful ways to avoid type 2 diabetes. But focusing only on diabetes misses the bigger picture. Insulin sensitivity touches every organ in the body, and perhaps nowhere is it more important than in the brain. For migraine sufferers, improving insulin sensitivity isn't just about blood sugar control. It can mean fewer migraines and better brain health overall. To understand why, we need to look at what insulin sensitivity actually means. When the body is insulin sensitive, cells respond quickly and effectively to insulin. Glucose from the bloodstream flows smoothly into cells, where it can be converted into energy. This is the way the system is designed to work. The brain, which depends on a constant flow of fuel, thrives under these conditions. Every neuron has the energy it needs to function, and the brain operates with stability and clarity. The problem comes when insulin resistance develops. In this state, cells don't respond as well to insulin, so the body compensates by producing more of it. The bloodstream ends up with both high insulin and high glucose, while the neurons that need steady fuel struggle to access it. This mismatch sets the stage for energy instability in the brain. When the brain's power supply wavers, neurons become more reactive, more sensitive, and more likely to tip into a migraine state. For someone prone to migraines, insulin resistance is like adding gasoline to the fire. This is why insulin sensitivity is such a critical piece of migraine management. It ensures that the brain has steady, reliable access to energy, reducing the instability that often precedes migraine attacks. It also improves mitochondrial function, reduces inflammation, and lowers oxidative stress, all of which have been linked to migraine frequency and severity. So while most people think of insulin sensitivity as just a metabolic issue, it is also very much a neurological one. The benefits extend far beyond migraine relief. Insulin sensitivity protects memory, supports mood stability, and reduces the risk of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, which some researchers even call type 3 diabetes. A brain that uses fuel efficiently is a brain that ages more gracefully. For migraine sufferers, this means that working on insulin sensitivity is not just about avoiding the next headache. It's about protecting long-term brain health. Improving insulin sensitivity doesn't require extreme measures. In fact, it often comes down to consistent lifestyle habits. Eating meals that minimize blood sugar spikes, moving the body daily, lifting weights to make muscles more metabolically active, managing stress, and prioritizing sleep all improve insulin sensitivity. Each small improvement builds resilience in the system, and the brain feels the benefit. Even modest changes can begin to stabilize energy, leading to fewer migraine triggers and more productive, pain-free days. It's also worth noting that improving insulin sensitivity gives people back a sense of control. Migraines often feel random, like an unpredictable force that steals time, energy, and opportunities. But when you understand the metabolic connection, you realize you have tools to fight back. Every healthy meal, every walk, every night of restorative sleep becomes part of your strategy to strengthen your brain against migraines. Instead of waiting for the next attack, you are actively building a defense system rooted in biology. So, while insulin sensitivity is often framed only as a way to prevent diabetes, that perspective is far too narrow. It is a cornerstone of overall health, and for migraine sufferers, it is a lifeline. By improving insulin sensitivity, you are not only protecting yourself from future metabolic disease, you are giving your brain the stability it craves. The result is fewer migraines, clearer thinking, better mood, and a stronger foundation for lifelong brain health. It's not just about avoiding what you fear, it's about creating the health and freedom you deserve.